In this video, we're going to discuss the next major concept of economics, and that is supply. So what you're going to find is that supply and demand are almost identical whenever you look at the terms of their definitions. But one deals with consumers and the other one deals with producers. Demand is the one that really deals with the consumer side of everything. They look at how much are consumers willing to buy at a series of alternate prices. Whenever we start dealing with supply, you're going to find that the definition of supply is almost identical, but as we read it, it is the quantities of a good that sellers are willing to offer at a series of alternate prices given a particular market at a particular time, ceteris paribus. So if you hear the words, they sound almost identical, but here's where they start differing. Supply says sellers are willing to offer. In demand, it says that consumers are willing to buy or that buyers are willing to purchase. So that's the major difference between supply and demand, is that supply deals with how much are producers willing to offer at a series of alternate prices, and how much demand deals with how much are consumers willing to purchase at a series of alternate prices. Well, just like with demand, supply looks at a relationship between prices and quantities. It evaluates that price-quantity combination for a particular good in a particular market at a particular time. So as with demand, we find that supply is a two-dimensional aspect as well. And this is very, very similar to demand. Just remember, one is dealing with producers offering something. The other one is dealing with consumers buying it. So just like with demand, and having a quantity demand, we have a quantity supplied. Quantity supplied is how much of a good or service that a producer is willing to offer at a single specific price. So just like with demand or quantity demanded, we said if you look at a single specific price, the amount that is being demanded would be the quantity demanded. Well, whenever you deal with quantity supplied, we're looking at how much is a producer willing to offer at a single specific price. So, an example of that is, if we bring it back to agriculture, an example of supply is we say if the cotton price is $3 per bale, or sorry, $3, let's say it's $3. And how much is that producer willing to offer at that price of $3? Well, that would be the quantity supplied. But if we started adding in a lot of different price and quantity combinations, saying how much are they willing to offer at $3? How much are they willing to offer at $3.25? How much are they willing to offer at $4, $5, $2.50? If we start looking at all of these price quantity combinations, that becomes the supply, because we're looking at how much are they willing to offer at a series of prices. And whenever we're looking at a single specific price, that's whenever we're dealing with quantity supplied. So quantity supplied is a one-dimensional concept. It is a single point or a single number. So just like we had with demand, we also have a supply schedule. So we had a demand schedule, and now we're going to add in the supply schedule. So the supply schedule identifies the price-quantity combinations that exist in a supply relationship. That actually sounds identical to the definition that we had for a demand schedule. The only difference is this word right here. And whenever we dealt with the demand schedule, that said that this is a demand relationship. When we're dealing with a supply schedule, we are dealing with a supply relationship. So here's our supply schedule right here. And what it does is it shows a series of prices and a series of quantity supplied at those prices. So if we look right here, we have quantity supplied. Quantity supplied is the amount that is being supplied at a single specific price. So if we look at the schedule and we say, all right, at $2, what is a quantity being supplied? 6.5 units. But if we look at the whole schedule in its entirety, now we're looking at the supply schedule in a whole. So whenever we look at it and whenever we move up and down this price, we're looking at changing quantity supplied but not supply itself. So supply is this relationship. And as we move and change these prices, we see that quantity supplied is changing, but the actual supply itself does not change, because supply is this relationship, and we actually see that these price quantity combinations do not change. It's just that the quantity supplied changes. So as long as we don't mess with these numbers, supply does not change. But we can change quantity supplied by moving up and down the prices. So another thing is, changing prices does not change supply. It never has and never will. By changing the prices, we do not change the amount or the supply relationship. By changing prices, we change the quantity that is being supplied. So just like with demand, we have supply and quantity supplied, and with demand we had demand and quantity demanded. These are two separate concepts. This one deals with a single point, a single number. It's one-dimensional. This one is a relationship. It is two-dimensional. So just like with demand and quantity demanded, try not to get supply and quantity supplied mixed up. So then that leads us into our supply curve. Our supply curve is a two-dimensional graph that is built off of the schedule. So just like in the previous video, we took this schedule and we developed a graph out of it. So on this graph, a couple things to notice on this graph, just like in the last video, is we have price on the vertical axis. We have quantity on the horizontal axis. So what does this graph really do? This graph gives us a visual representation, a two-dimensional graph that is a visual representation of this supply schedule. And if we look at it, we have price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. That is two very important aspects of whenever you're drawing graphs in economics, is to make sure that you have the proper names on the proper axis. So if we see here, we have price here, quantity here, and we have this supply schedule that is upward sloping. Demand was a downward sloping curve. Whenever we deal with supply, it is an upward sloping curve. And something else to notice, we have this little symbol out here on the end. That is an S. So whenever we draw our lines, whenever we draw our curves, we also need to label them. So over here we labeled that as an S. On the demand curve, if you go back to the video, you'll see that there's actually a D on the end of that demand curve, showing that that is the demand curve. Because we might have 10 or 20 different curves all on the same graph sometimes, and we might need to be able to identify each one. So we have each and every one of them labeled. And a proper graph in economics will have the horizontal axes and the vertical axis labeled, as well as any curves on the graph is labeled. And usually we often have a title in it. Since we're only dealing with the supply curve, I'm leaving the title out for right now. But the thing to make sure that you know about this one is it is upward sloping. Well, what does that mean? It means that as prices increase, so does the quantity that's being supplied. So quantity increases as prices increase, which that makes sense. Because if you're a producer and the prices are higher, you want to produce more. But whenever prices are lower, you actually want to produce less. So that kind of comes out to be, if you have a farm, and on this farm you can plant corn or cotton. If the prices are really high for cotton, you might plant your whole farm in cotton. But if prices are really high for corn, you might plant your whole farm in corn. Or at the kind of middle of the road, you might plant even 50 and 50, 50% corn, 50% cotton. Well, how does that really relate to this? Well, as the price of a good increases, it provides more of an incentive for you to take your resources out of their current employment and put it into this other aspect. So, for example, let's say that corn prices are real high, and then next year corn prices fall, but cotton prices come up. Well, this farmer is going to want to take its resources that it would normally put into corn and put it into cotton, because it can make more money in cotton than it could in corn now. So as prices increases, it encourages people to take their current resources take their current inputs out of their current resources and place them in something else that provides more revenue, more money, more profit. So that's what we see here. As prices increase, it provides more of an incentive to producers to produce more of that product, so they wind up doing that to where as prices go up, so does the quantity supplied. So that pretty much concludes supply. The main things that you need to recognize out of this is that as prices increase, the quantity supplied is going to increase. And that supply is this two-dimensional relationship. It is this two-dimensional concept that is a relationship between prices and quantities, whereas quantity supplied is a one-dimensional point. It shows how much are you going to supply at a single specific price.